This is a story of the rich getting richer,
while the poor are now poorer.
After all, as the movie Wall Street says,
it's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. Money itself isn't lost or made, it's simply transferred.
and that's a mistake a lot of people make. It's as if they think wealth is like a pot.
Oh, do you smell that? Fresh baked pie right from the oven. Do you like a piece? Which of you gets a big piece?
In a zero-sum game, the rich take a big piece, so the rest of us have less. But in a free society...
It's not a zero-sum game. The makers who get rich by baking many more pies.
I love pie. John Stossel has a mind for liberty and a bod for sin. He also hosts my favorite show on Fox Business Network. It's called Appropriately Enough, Stossel. You can see it here tomorrow night at 9 p.m. And tomorrow night's show, which you just saw a snippet of, is all about income inequality. John, is life fair?
No, but I want it to be fair.
You do?
Yeah, it's nicer if we're more equal. You don't, I mean, this is the libertarian show. I'll play devil's advocate.
Okay.
It sort of creeps me out. Larry Ellison is the third richest man in the country, and he spends his money on America's Cup catamarans and selfish things and gives almost nothing to charity while other people suffer. It's unfair.
What about people who say that paying your taxes is charity enough?
Well, that's justification for saying there ought to be a little more charity, pay more taxes.
Oh, that's awful. But then people like Larry Ellison would have smaller boats.
Well, he ought to have smaller boats and less money and give it to the poor. I think most people think that way. The idea that if you are free, there will be great disparities. And now that we have globalization, you can sell stuff over the world, the disparity will grow even more. But I think Obama has a good selling point in saying, this is wrong, we're going to fix it. We're going to make America nicer by making us more equal. And they don't realize that making us more equal leaves everyone poorer.
Do you think that there's some, in the fairness kind of critique, coming from the left especially, are there the seeds of legitimate complaints, not just how you want to feel, but like, are they pointing to some actual unfairness that the system or the rich people or the government is in?
If people are using government to get rich, yes, but otherwise, no.
Even if there's, what about the concentrated wealth kind of factor? I'm married to the country of France, and so they have huge taxes on rich people when they die because the wealth perpetuates at the expense of lower class people is the argument. And, you know, they use the power to consolidate their gains. What do you say to that argument?
Well, I'm going to make enemies among libertarians. I don't mind an estate tax when you die. The idea the rich just keep giving to their kids that advantage. Of course, then you just funnel money to tax lawyers who help you escape that.
Hide it
doesn't
somehow?
really work.
Well, we won't become enemies, but I do sort of take issue with the fact that even we, right now, are sort of slipping between using income and wealth interchangeably, and the two things are very different, and that seems to be the real issue here. Granted, I think the president does make a case that is probably compelling to a lot of people when he talks about income inequality, but wealth inequality is another thing entirely.
That's a really good distinction. That's a really good point.
Why does that matter?
Well, because the lifestyle that I lead and LeBron James leads are very different in a number of important ways, and perhaps I shouldn't use myself as an example because someone is suggesting that I'm very wealthy. But at any rate, both of us can get from D.C. to New York City in roughly 3 hours. I may fly economy or coach. He flies private. Both of us can drive cars and do exactly the same trip in 5 minutes. And I'll probably have GPS. I'll probably have automatic seat belts and all sorts of other fancy gizmos. He may do it in a Maybach. I may do it in a 5 Series or a Camry, but at the end of the day, we're both getting there. There's something really egalitarian about capitalism, and it makes it hard to measure genuine inequality.
Because of freedom and capitalism, even the poor live lives that the kings would have envied years ago. That's true.
Well, let's talk about the war on poverty, because Lyndon Johnson declared war on poverty 50 years ago when poverty was actually declining. And ever since then, the government has invested trillions of dollars, and it is either plateaued or ticked up slightly, especially under President Obama.
And I totally fell for it. I was in college then, and it was, yes, we know what works. There's just no excuse for people being poor in this rich country. And we had the war on poverty. I have this graph of the poverty rate here. To me, it's fascinating. I can't believe it hasn't gotten more reporting. Look how poverty dropped in the 6 years since the war on poverty began. Thousands of people were taken out of poverty. But then look at before the war. Americans were lifting themselves out of poverty on their own before the war. The war on poverty stopped progress. Since then, it's been up and down. They taught people to be dependent. Johnson made it worse.
And Obama is only further fostering that dependency.
Yeah, it's still that wish. Yes, a little government program will just make everybody more equal, and they don't see the side effects.
Don't we sort of cherry pick in that argument, though, a little bit? Like, we'll hear libertarians and other people also say, hey, look, the median income in 1970, adjusted for inflation, was $15,000. Now it's closer to $27,000 or $28,000. And going to your point, you know, everyone has air conditioning and televisions and things now that they didn't right there. So that war on poverty line doesn't really measure those types of gains, right?
Right, and those things would have happened anyway, and I would say that the poor would be doing even better if we weren't taking trillions from people to have government redistribute it.
I actually saw today Dylan Matthews from the Washington Post Wonk blog had a little line saying that all of the gains that have happened against poverty since 1967 are directly attributable to the government. There isn't any other factor that has changed those lines.
Yeah, and for a president who's so committed to, you know, this restarting of the war on poverty, it has grown on his watch.
Yeah, looking at poverty around the world, though, I think is also interesting. It's not just about income inequality here. It's about the growth of wealth around the world, what's happened in China, what's happening in India. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I don't know that you can credit government for those gains.
No, you can't.
Suspect
it's the free market lifted million. And you say restart the war on poverty? They never stopped it. There have been a couple cutbacks, but
has there ever been a
grown.
successful war on anything? War on drugs, war on poverty, war on terror?
Well, I thought World War II was pretty good.
The war on the Germans and Italians, and Japanese.
Well,
take your triumvirate and you can
we
shove
had
it up
to
your
stop
panzer
Hitler,
tank.
you know, occasionally war, I would say, is necessary.
All right. Well, you are necessary to the success of Fox Business and to the light in my life. I appreciate you always, John Stossel.
Thank you, Kennedy.
Come back as often as you like.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.